5 years had passed since Marcus Chen first whispered his prayers over a dead wolf woman, and the galaxy had become unrecognizable. The Compassion Alliance now encompassed over 200 worlds, but more importantly, the principles it represented had taken root in places far beyond its official borders. Marcus stood in his workshop aboard the massive ship that had become the Alliance's mobile headquarters, putting the finishing touches on a memorial carving. It depicted the moment when Lyra had first opened her eyes, surrounded by the tools and half-finished casket that had started everything. The piece would be installed on New Fenrath, the world the Fenrathi survivors had established as their new homeworld. Still working with your hands. I see, Lyra said, entering the workshop with her characteristic silent grace. The years had changed her too. The silver in her fur now held permanent traces of starlight, and her amber eyes seemed to reflect depths that went beyond the physical universe. Some things never change, Marcus replied, setting down his carving knife. How did the council meeting go? The Krikaros Integration Accord passed unanimously. General Vrakmoth's people will be joining us as full members within the month. Lyra smiled, an expression that still revealed her fangs but now carried only warmth. He asked me to tell you that he still thinks you're insane, but it's apparently the good kind of insanity. Marcus laughed. The former purist general had become one of the Alliance's most effective leaders, his warrior's perspective helping them navigate the complexities of galactic politics. The integration of his forces had been challenging, but it proved that even the most hardened opponents could find common ground when approached with genuine respect. Any word from the deep space expedition? Lyra's expression grew more serious. They've made contact with the Void Wraiths. Marcus paused in his work. The Void Wraiths were one of the galaxy's great mysteries, a species that existed partially outside normal space-time, appearing only to harvest the life force of dying civilizations. They had been active for millions of years, treating other species as nothing more than energy sources. And Captain Torres reports that they're curious. Apparently, they've never encountered a civilization that seemed to be growing stronger through cooperation instead of weaker through conflict. They want to understand how it's possible. It was typical of how the galaxy had changed. Where once first contact with a species like the Void Wraiths would have meant immediate warfare, now it meant opportunities for understanding and mutual benefit. The universe keeps teaching us that there's no such thing as a truly evil species, Marcus observed. Just species that have forgotten how to connect with anything beyond themselves. Dr. Martinez appeared in the workshop doorway, her hair now showing streaks of silver, but her eyes still bright with scientific curiosity. Marcus, we're getting some unusual readings from the Stellar Cartography Lab. Something you should see. They made their way through the ship's corridors, passing the mix of species that had become commonplace in Alliance space. Human children played with young Kethmori, their scales shifting through playful patterns. Tellurian crystal formations provided natural lighting that Andromedan poets used for inspiration. Former enemies had become family. The Stellar Cartography Lab was buzzing with activity. The main display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, but something was different about it. Streams of light connected star systems across vast distances, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. It started 3 hours ago, Dr. Martinez explained. Every system where the Alliance has established a presence is connected to every other system by these energy streams. But Marcus, they're not just connections between our worlds. The display zoomed out, showing the galaxy from a broader perspective. The network of light extended far beyond Alliance space, touching systems they'd never visited, species they'd never contacted. It's spreading, Marcus breathed, at an accelerating rate. And wherever the network reaches, we're detecting what can only be described as improvements. Conflict resolution, technological breakthroughs, artistic renaissance. It's as if the entire galaxy is experiencing what happened here on a local scale. Lyra moved closer to the display, her enhanced senses detecting patterns that the instruments couldn't measure. The first pack, she said quietly. This is what they were really after. Not just justice for past wrongs, but the transformation of consciousness itself. As if summoned by her words, the familiar shimmer of cosmic presence filled the room. The lead wolf of the first pack materialized, its starlight form even more magnificent than Marcus remembered. The hunt is complete, the wolf announced, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated through every soul in the galaxy. The seeds of compassion have taken root. The network of connection grows beyond anything we dared hope. Marcus felt a familiar warmth spreading through his chest. But this time it was different. Instead of the focused intensity of his original marking, it felt like coming home after a long journey. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now the galaxy learns to hunt together," the wolf replied. "Not for prey, but for understanding. Not for conquest, but for connection. The eternal hunt continues, but its quarry has changed." The wolf began to fade, but its voice remained strong. "You have done well, Carpenter. The prayers you whispered over a dead enemy have become songs sung across the stars. The universe remembers, and it is pleased." As the cosmic presence disappeared, Marcus looked around at his friends, his colleagues, his family that had grown to encompass entire civilizations. The workshop where it all began seemed very far away, but the simple wooden tools on his workbench reminded him that some things remained constant. "So what do we do tomorrow?" Dr. Martinez asked with a grin. "Same thing we did today," Marcus replied. "We build something beautiful." Through the viewport, the stars seemed brighter than usual, and if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the sound of cosmic wolves howling with joy as they hunted through the spaces between worlds, ensuring that compassion and cruelty would always be in balance, and that love would always have claws when it needed them. The Compassion Alliance continued to grow, not through conquest but through invitation, not through force but through example. And in workshops, in laboratories, in council chambers, in kindergartens, in every corner of the galaxy where conscious beings chose kindness over cruelty, the echo of Marcus Chen's simple prayer continued to resonate. The stars had heard, and they would never forget. In his workshop, Marcus returned to his carving, humming an old Earth song his wife had loved. Outside, the eternal hunt continued, but now it hunted for joy instead of sorrow, for understanding instead of dominance, for the kind of galaxy where a carpenter's compassion could reshape reality itself. And somewhere in the cosmic background radiation, if you knew how to listen, you could still hear the whisper that had started it all. "The stars heard my prayers." 6 months after the first pack's appearance, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Compassion Alliance had grown from a single space station to a network of worlds spanning dozens of star systems, but it bore no resemblance to the empires that had come before it. There were no conquered territories, no subject peoples, no central authority demanding tribute. Instead, worlds joined the alliance because they wanted to be part of something better, something that made compassion and cooperation the foundation of interstellar civilization. Marcus found himself traveling between these worlds, not as a ruler or emperor, but as something entirely new, a catalyst for positive change. Wherever he went, people seemed to remember their better natures. Communities found solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable, and the impossible became merely improbable. On Teleros Prime, he helped mediate a centuries-old conflict between two subspecies of the crystalline Tellurians who had been fighting over mineral rights. What should have taken months of negotiation was resolved in a single day when both sides realized they could share the resources and actually become more prosperous through cooperation. "You don't solve problems," observed Ambassador Kethline, one of the crystal beings who had witnessed the mediation. "You help people remember that the problems were artificial to begin with." Lyra, meanwhile, had become something like the Alliance's spiritual center. Other resurrected beings began appearing across the galaxy, individuals who had died performing acts of extraordinary selflessness and been called back by the cosmic forces that the first pack represented. They gravitated toward her, forming a loose network of what people started calling the Returned. Each of them brought unique gifts. There was Jorik, a human engineer who had died saving a mining colony and now could sense the optimal solutions to any technical problem. Felthara, an Andromedan poet who had sacrificed herself to protect children during a war and could now speak words that healed psychological trauma. Dozens of others from every species and walk of life, united by the fact that they had chosen love over fear, even in the face of death. "We're not meant to be leaders," Lyra explained to Marcus during one of their regular conversations. "We're meant to be examples, proof that the best parts of any species' nature can triumph over the worst." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Not everyone welcomed the changes sweeping across the galaxy. Remnants of the Keth-Mori Empire had regrouped under a new leader, General Vrekmoth, who blamed the Alliance for the collapse of everything his people had built. More troubling were the Purists, a movement that had emerged among several species who believed that the cosmic intervention represented a contamination of the natural order. They argued that suffering and conflict were necessary parts of evolution, and that the Alliance's philosophy would lead to weakness and stagnation. The crisis came to a head when purist extremists launched coordinated attacks on 3 Alliance worlds, targeting civilian populations with weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. The attacks killed thousands and wounded tens of thousands more, creating exactly the kind of tragedy that the Alliance existed to prevent. The Alliance Council convened an emergency session, with many members calling for military retaliation. The Alliance had the technology and numbers to crush the purist movement, and public anger was running high. "They're terrorists," declared Councillor Retma, a Vrex representative whose own homeworld had been targeted. "They reject every principle we stand for. How can we show them compassion when they respond to it with murder?" Marcus sat quietly through hours of debate, feeling the weight of expectation from everyone present. As the one who had triggered the cosmic intervention, his opinion carried enormous influence. Many expected him to call for justice, for the Alliance to finally use its power to eliminate a threat to innocent life. When he finally spoke, his words surprised everyone. "We don't fight them," he said quietly. "We go to them." The council erupted in protests, but Marcus continued. "The purists aren't evil. They're afraid. Afraid that change means their cultures, their identities, their ways of life will disappear. That's a rational fear, and responding to it with violence will only prove that they were right to be afraid." "You're suggesting we negotiate with murderers?" Councillor Retma demanded. "I'm suggesting we do what we always do. We show them a better way." Lyra stood to support him. The First Pact didn't destroy the Kethmori Empire through violence alone. They destroyed it by removing the fear that held it together. The purists are held together by the same thing. The plan that emerged was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of sending warships, the Alliance sent volunteers, thousands of them, from every member world. They traveled to purist-controlled systems not as conquerors but as teachers, engineers, doctors, and artists. They offered technological assistance without demanding political control. They provided medical aid without asking for conversion to Alliance principles. They simply demonstrated through their actions that the Alliance way of life didn't threaten other cultures, it enhanced them. Marcus himself led the mission to the purist stronghold on Krakaros, a harsh world where General Vrakmoth had established his headquarters. The former Kethmori officer agreed to meet with him only because Marcus came alone and unarmed. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Human," Vrakmoth said, his scales showing the deep red of barely controlled aggression. "I could kill you where you stand and deal a crippling blow to your Alliance." "You could," Marcus agreed calmly. "But that wouldn't solve the problem that brought us both here." "What problem?" "Your existence is the problem." Marcus looked around the general's command center, noting the efficiency of the operation, the loyalty of the troops, the genuine conviction in their leaders' eyes. "You're afraid that compassion equals weakness, that if the galaxy becomes a kinder place, there won't be room for strength and honor and the warrior virtues your people value." Vrakmoth's scales shifted to a surprised purple. "You understand? I understand that you've seen empires rise and fall through military might, and you think the Alliance is just another empire wearing a prettier mask." Marcus stepped closer, and Vrakmoth's guards tensed, but their leader held up a hand to stop them. "The difference is that we're not trying to replace your empire. We're trying to make empires unnecessary, impossible. There will always be those who take what they want by force, and there will always be those who stop them. But maybe, just maybe, we can create a galaxy where fewer people want to use force in the first place." Marcus gestured toward the stars visible through the command center's viewport. "Your people are warriors. The Alliance needs warriors. The difference is that we fight to protect instead of to conquer." The conversation lasted for hours, stretching through the night cycle and into the following day. Other purist leaders joined the discussion, then Alliance representatives arrived to share their perspectives. What had begun as a confrontation between enemies gradually became something else entirely. A dialogue about what kind of galaxy they all wanted to live in. The breakthrough came when one of Vrakmoth's young officers, a female named Zarketh, spoke up during a pause in the discussions. "General, my brother died in the attack on Verdania Station, killed by Alliance defenders who were protecting civilians." She paused, her scales showing the deep blue of profound sadness. "But when I saw the casualty reports, I realized something. The Alliance defenders died too. They died protecting people who weren't even their own species, people they'd never met. Vrackmoth's expression softened slightly. Zarketh, I want to be part of something that creates that kind of courage, General. The kind that comes from caring about others instead of just about winning. The moment stretched between them, and Marcus felt the cosmic forces that had changed his life stirring again. Not dramatically, not with the overwhelming power of the first pack, but with the quiet certainty of seeds taking root in fertile ground. Perhaps, Vrackmoth said slowly, we have been asking the wrong questions. In the days following the cosmic battle, word of what happened at the construction station spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Kethmori Empire, which had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for centuries, suddenly found itself facing something unprecedented. Rebellion sparked not by weapons or tactics, but by hope. Marcus discovered that his transformation went far beyond the mark left by the first pack. He could sense things now. The emotional resonance of people around him, the underlying currents of compassion or cruelty that drove their actions. More importantly, he could inspire others to choose kindness over selfishness, understanding over prejudice. It's not mind control, he explained to Dr. Martinez during one of her examinations. I can't make people do anything they don't already want to do deep down. But I can help them remember what they actually want, underneath all the fear and anger. The station had become an unexpected hub of activity. Ships arrived daily carrying refugees from across the Kethmori territories. Not just humans, but dozens of other species that had been enslaved or oppressed. They came seeking the protection of the place where the cosmic wolves had appeared, where the impossible had become reality. Lyra had taken on the role of military coordinator, her resurrection having awakened abilities she'd never possessed in life. She could communicate with any species in their native language, understand the tactical needs of completely alien forms of warfare, and most remarkably, she could sense the presence of others who had been touched by cosmic forces. There are more like us, she told Marcus one morning as they watched a convoy of Rex refugee ships dock with the station. Others who have been changed by acts of extreme compassion or sacrifice. The first pack's awakening has created ripples across the entire galaxy. Administrator Wells had evolved from a nervous bureaucrat into something resembling a galactic diplomat. He coordinated the constant stream of arrivals, managed resources that shouldn't have been sufficient but somehow always stretched to meet demand, and served as the official voice of what people were starting to call the Compassion Alliance. We're getting reports from 17 different star systems, he briefed Marcus and Lyra during their daily planning session. Former Kethmori subject worlds are declaring independence. Trade routes are opening up between species that haven't spoken to each other in generations. And somehow, everywhere this happens, there's at least one person who claims to have been touched by starlight. Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of it through his enhanced senses. The universe is correcting itself. All those years of oppression and cruelty created an imbalance. What happened here was just the catalyst. The transformation wasn't limited to individuals. Technology began behaving strangely around the station, becoming more efficient and responsive than its specifications should have allowed. The hydroponics bays produced crops that were more nutritious than they had any right to be. The recycling systems worked at impossible efficiency levels, turning waste into useful materials with minimal energy input. Dr. Martinez had a theory about it. Reality itself is becoming more responsive to conscious intent, she explained to a gathering of the station's department heads. It's as if the universe is rewarding positive actions with increased effectiveness. The most dramatic evidence of this came when a damaged Tellurian colony ship arrived, its life support failing and its population of 3,000 civilians slowly dying from a plague that their medical technology couldn't cure. Dr. Martinez and her team worked for 18 hours straight, using conventional treatments that should have been inadequate. But as Marcus moved through the medical bay, offering what comfort he could to the dying, something remarkable happened. Patients began recovering at rates that defied medical explanation, not through miracle cures or impossible healing, but through their own immune systems suddenly working with peak efficiency. Their body's natural healing processes accelerated and optimized. It's not magic, Dr. Martinez insisted, though her voice carried wonder. It's more like the universe is remembering how things are supposed to work when compassion is the driving force instead of profit or power. The Kethmori Empire, meanwhile, was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. With Emperor Vexthul missing and presumed dead after the first pack's attack, the various sector governors were fighting among themselves for control. But more importantly, their subject populations were no longer afraid. Reports came in daily of Kethmori garrisons being overwhelmed not by superior weapons, but by sheer numbers of people who had simply decided they'd had enough. The reptilian overlords discovered that their technology and training meant little when facing entire populations who had lost their fear of death. Fear was their primary weapon, Lyra observed, studying the tactical reports. Take that away and they're just another species with ships and guns. And there are a lot more of us than there are of them. But the Alliance's greatest victory came when a group of young Kethmori arrived at the station in a stolen transport ship. They were led by a female named Sithkara, whose scales shimmered with colors Marcus had never seen before, soft blues and greens that spoke of peace rather than aggression. We heard about what happened here, she explained through a translator, though Marcus found he could understand her meaning directly. About the human who honored the dead enemy, and the cosmic judgment that followed. We want to learn how to be worthy of such honor. The arrival of Kethmori seeking to join the Alliance created a stir throughout the station, but Marcus felt something through his enhanced senses that made him smile. These young reptilians carried no trace of the cruelty or arrogance that characterized their species' empire. Instead, they radiated genuine curiosity and a desire for redemption. The sins of their people aren't their sins, he told the Alliance Council. And if the universe is truly correcting itself, then maybe it's creating the possibility for any species to choose a better path. The integration wasn't easy. Many refugees couldn't forget the cruelties they'd suffered under Kethmori rule. But as the young reptilians worked alongside other species, helping with construction projects and sharing their advanced technical knowledge freely, barriers began to break down. Sithkara proved particularly valuable, her people's understanding of galactic infrastructure, helping the Alliance establish secure communication networks and trade routes. More importantly, her presence sent a message that spread throughout Kethmori space. Redemption was possible for those willing to seek it. We're not building an empire, Marcus told a gathering of Alliance representatives as they discussed expansion plans. We're not even building a government in the traditional sense. We're building a community based on the principle that every conscious being deserves compassion and respect. Lyra smiled at his words, her amber eyes reflecting starlight. The first pack chose well when they marked you, Carpenter. You understand that true power comes from lifting others up, not holding them down. As Marcus looked out at the bustling station, watching dozens of species working together in harmony that would have been impossible just months ago, he felt the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope in equal measure. The universe had heard his prayers just as Lyra had said. But more than that, it had answered with possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. The Kethmori fleet moved into attack formation with military precision, their massive warships bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But as they approached the space station, something impossible began to happen around them. The wolves made of starlight materialized from the cosmic void, each one the size of a frigate. They moved through space as if it were solid ground, their forms shifting between translucent energy and something that seemed more real than reality itself. Their eyes burned with the light of dying stars, and their howls created ripples in space-time that made the Kethmori ships shudder. Emperor Vexthul's voice crackled over the emergency frequencies, no longer composed and authoritative. What in the nine hells are those things? In Marcus's workshop, Lyra remained kneeling with her hands against the floor. But now her silver fur seemed to glow with the same ethereal light as the cosmic wolves. When she spoke, her voice carried across every communication channel in the system. You wanted to know what humans do with their dead, Emperor. We honor them. We remember them. And sometimes, when the universe deems it necessary, we give them the power to return and settle old debts. The first pack moved among the Kethmori ships like shepherds among sheep, but these were not gentle guardians. They were predators, and they had been waiting eons for prey worthy of their attention. The lead wolf, larger than the others and crackling with energy that made space itself bend around it, approached the Emperor's flagship. Its howl was a sound that bypassed the ears entirely, resonating directly in the bones and souls of every living being within light years. On his bridge, Emperor Vexthul screamed orders at his crew. Fire! Fire everything! The flagship's weapons discharged in brilliant streams of destructive energy, enough firepower to vaporize a moon. The beam struck the cosmic wolf and passed through it harmlessly, as if shooting at a ghost made of pure intention. The wolf's response was swift and terrible. It opened its jaws and breathed out a stream of something that looked like liquefied starlight. Where the breath touched the flagship's hull, the metal didn't just melt or vaporize, it ceased to exist, as if the universe had decided that particular matter no longer deserved to be real. Marcus watched in awe and terror as the cosmic battle unfolded outside the viewport. The Kethmori ships were powerful, their technology advanced beyond anything humanity had achieved, but they were fighting forces that existed outside the normal laws of physics. How is this possible? Dr. Martinez whispered, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Lyra opened her eyes and Marcus saw that they now held flecks of the same starlight that formed the wolves. The universe has rules, Doctor. Physical laws, yes, but also moral ones. For too long, beings like the Emperor have ignored those moral laws, believing that power exempts them from consequences. Another Kethmori destroyer tried to flee, its engines burning at maximum output. One of the Star Wolves simply appeared in front of it, as if distance was a suggestion rather than a limitation. The wolf's claws, each one a stream of concentrated gravity, raked across the ship's hull. The destroyer folded in on itself like paper, imploding into a point of light that winked out of existence. The first pack doesn't just hunt prey, Lyra continued, rising to her feet. They hunt injustice itself. Every innocent life the Kethmori have taken, every world they've enslaved, every act of cruelty they've committed, it's all been recorded in the cosmic memory. And now that debt comes due. Administrator Wells was frantically trying to contact the remaining human settlements in the system. Should we be afraid of those things too? The first pack hunts only those who have forgotten compassion, Lyra assured him. Your people built me a shrine of respect without even knowing if I would return. You honored a dead enemy because it was the right thing to do. The wolves know the difference. Emperor Vexthul's flagship was now missing large sections of its hull, the cosmic wolf continuing its methodical destruction. The Emperor himself appeared on the emergency frequencies, his usually commanding voice cracking with fear. Stop this madness. I am Emperor of 17 star systems. I command fleets that... You command nothing, Lyra interrupted, her voice reaching him across the void. You are a petty tyrant who forgot that power without compassion is just elaborate weakness. The lead wolf paused in its destruction of the flagship and turned its starlight gaze toward the space station. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of solar winds and cosmic storms, audible to every mind in the system. The debt is not yet paid in full. Lyra nodded as if she'd been expecting this. The Emperor still lives. The first pack's justice is thorough. Wait, Marcus said, stepping forward. What exactly does that mean? Before Lyra could answer, the cosmic wolf that had been attacking the flagship suddenly appeared inside the station, phasing through the hull as if it were made of mist. It materialized in Marcus's workshop, its massive form somehow fitting within the confined space despite being the size of a small ship. The wolf's presence was overwhelming, like standing next to a barely contained star. Its eyes fixed on Marcus, and when it spoke, he felt the words resonate in his bones. You are the one who called us back. I just made a coffin, Marcus stammered. I wanted to give her a proper burial. You saw an enemy and chose compassion. You honored the dead when no one was watching. You proved that in a universe full of cruelty, kindness still exists. The wolf's massive head tilted slightly. Such acts create echoes across all dimensions. The first pack has been waiting for such an echo for millennia. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a warmth that spread from his chest outward. What's happening to me? You are being marked, the wolf explained. Not for harm, but for protection. And for responsibility. The universe has taken notice of your species, Carpenter. Through your actions, humanity has earned the right to be guardians rather than merely survivors. Lyra moved to stand beside Marcus, her hand touching his shoulder. The first pack doesn't just punish the cruel. They also empower the compassionate. You've just become humanity's first true champion. Outside, the battle was winding down. The remaining Kethmori ships were either destroyed or fleeing, their crews broadcasting surrender messages on all frequencies. Emperor Vexthul's flagship was a broken wreck, barely maintaining life support. The cosmic wolf in the workshop began to fade, but its voice remained clear. The hunt continues across the galaxy. We go now to settle other debts, to balance other scales. But we leave you this gift, Carpenter, the knowledge that compassion is the greatest force in the universe, and that those who wield it properly are never truly powerless. As the wolf disappeared, Marcus felt the weight of its words settle on his shoulders. Through the viewport, he watched the first pack vanish back into the spaces between stars, their cosmic howls fading into the background radiation of the universe. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly. Lyra smiled, her amber eyes bright with possibilities. "Now we rebuild, but this time we do it right." The wolf woman moved with fluid grace despite having been dead for 3 days. She examined her body with the clinical assessment of a warrior, testing muscles and joints, checking the healing wounds that Dr. Martinez had documented. "My name is Lyra Moonwhisper," she said, looking at Marcus with those piercing amber eyes. "I was second pack leader of the Fenrathi resistance before they captured me." "Marcus Chen," he replied, still struggling to process what was happening. "But Lyra, those alarms. There's a Kethmori battle fleet coming. We need to evacuate." Lyra's expression darkened, her lips pulling back in a snarl that revealed her fangs. "Emperor Vexthal. He must have detected what happened here. The old legends speak of this, Carpenter. When the dead return through acts of pure compassion, it signals a shift in the cosmic balance. The tyrants always sense it first." Administrator Wells burst into the workshop, his face flushed with panic. He stopped dead when he saw Lyra sitting up, very much alive and alert. "Dear God," he whispered. "How is this possible?" "Long story," Marcus said quickly. "What's the situation with the fleet?" Wells shook himself back to focus. 12 warships, including the Emperor's flagship. They're demanding we surrender the human responsible for interfering with Imperial gifts. They specifically mentioned your name, Marcus. Lyra stood, her movements predatory and precise. Despite having been dead, she seemed to possess incredible vitality, as if death had somehow purified and strengthened her. "How many fighters does this station have?" "Fighters?" Wells laughed bitterly. "We're a construction platform. We have some work shuttles and a few security patrol craft. Nothing that could stand against a single Kethmori destroyer, let alone a battle fleet." "Then we run," Marcus said. "Evacuate everyone to the transport ships and—" "No." Lyra's voice carried absolute authority. "Running only delays the inevitable. The Emperor will hunt down every human in this system to make an example. This ends here." She turned to Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. It wasn't just gratitude or determination. It was the look of someone who had seen beyond the veil of death and returned with knowledge that changed everything. "The resurrection. It's not just about me coming back," she explained. "When someone crosses over and returns, they carry something with them. A connection to the forces that shape reality itself. I can feel it, Carpenter. The stars are listening now." Dr. Martinez arrived at that moment, her medical scanner in hand. She took one look at Lyra and her jaw dropped. "Vital signs are off the charts. Heart rate, brain activity, cellular regeneration. It's like every biological system is operating at peak efficiency. Because I'm no longer just Fenrathi," Lyra said simply. "I'm something new, something that the universe created in response to an act of pure compassion." She looked at Marcus again. "Your act of compassion." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're saying I somehow caused this?" "Not caused, enabled. The universe responds to certain frequencies of emotion and intent. What you did for me, honoring a dead enemy with no expectation of reward, it resonated across dimensions." Lyra moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "I can feel them out there. Every soul that ever died unjustly. Every warrior who fell fighting tyranny. They're all connected now, and they're all listening." Administrator Wells was frantically checking his communication device. "The Kethmori fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. They're hailing us." "Put them through," Lyra said. "I don't think that's—" "Put them through." Wells activated the main communication system, and Emperor Vexthal's scaled face appeared on the workshop's display screen. His eyes immediately fixed on Lyra, and his scales shifted to a deep purple that Marcus recognized as extreme shock. "Impossible," the Emperor hissed. "You were dead. I watched you die in my arena." "Death is not always permanent, Tyrant," Lyra replied, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the station's hull. especially when the universe itself demands justice. Vexthal's shock quickly turned to rage, his scales flashing crimson. Whatever sorcery brought you back, it ends now. I'll reduce this station to atoms and scatter your remains across the void. You're welcome to try. The screen went dark as the Emperor cut the connection. Wells immediately began issuing evacuation orders, but Lyra raised her hand. Tell your people to remain calm and stay at their posts, she said. What happens next will determine the fate of more than just this station. Marcus grabbed her arm. Lyra, they have 12 warships. You can't fight an entire fleet. She turned to him with a smile that was both gentle and terrible. I'm not going to fight them, Carpenter. I'm going to show them what happens when the universe decides it's had enough of their cruelty. Lyra walked to the center of the workshop and knelt on the floor. She placed her hands flat against the metal decking and closed her eyes. The air around her began to shimmer, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation across his skin. The Fenrathi have legends about the first pack, she said, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality, the original wolf spirits that hunted alongside the gods themselves. When the galaxy was young and justice still had claws and fangs, the shimmer around her intensified, and Marcus could swear he heard something like distant howling coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Those spirits never left, Lyra continued. They've been waiting in the spaces between stars, hoping that someday someone would prove that compassion still existed in the universe. Someone would show that even enemies could be honored in death. The howling grew louder, and through the viewport Marcus saw something that defied explanation, shapes moving in the darkness of space, visible despite the absence of any light source, massive forms that looked like wolves made of starlight and cosmic wind. The first pack has heard my call, Lyra whispered, and they are very, very angry. Marcus worked through the night, his hands moving with practiced precision as he carved the most beautiful wooden casket he had ever created. The grain of the imported oak seemed to flow like water under his tools, revealing patterns that reminded him of flowing fur and swift movement. He incorporated design elements from the Fenrathi patterns he'd found in the database, interweaving them with human craftsmanship in a way that honored both traditions. The wolf woman lay on his work table, and as the hours passed, Marcus found himself talking to her. It was an old habit from his workshop back on Earth, where he'd spent countless hours alone with his projects, speaking his thoughts aloud to help focus his mind. The database says your people believe in the eternal hunt, he said, carefully shaping a corner of the casket with his smallest chisel. Says that warriors who die with honor get to chase the great silver deer across the sky forever. He paused, studying her face. You look like someone who died with honor. The work was slow, meticulous. Marcus carved scenes from Fenrathi mythology into the wood, depicting the great wolf spirits that supposedly guided their people's destiny. He'd never been particularly religious, but something about the woman's presence made him want to get every detail perfect. By the second day, word of Marcus's project had spread through the station. Other humans began stopping by his workshop bringing offerings. Someone brought wildflowers from the hydroponics bay. Another settler contributed a piece of cloth woven in the traditional Fenrathi pattern colors of silver and deep blue. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the station's chief medical officer, arrived with the expression of professional curiosity. I've been studying the body, she said without preamble. With your permission, of course. The things I'm finding are remarkable. Marcus looked up from his carving. What do you mean? Her cellular structure shows signs of recent trauma, but there's something else. Some kind of energy residue in her nervous system. It's faint, almost undetectable, but it's there. Dr. Martinez pulled up a holographic display from her tablet. I've never seen anything like it. Is that unusual? For a dead body? Extremely. It's almost like her brain is still showing minimal electrical activity, but that's impossible. She's been clinically dead for over 48 hours. Marcus set down his tools and approached the table where the wolf woman lay. In the soft light of his workshop, her silver fur seemed to gleam with an inner radiance that he hadn't noticed before. Her face, while still clearly lifeless, appeared more peaceful than when she'd first arrived. Maybe it's just some kind of post-mortem phenomenon, Dr. Martinez continued. Different species, different biology. But Marcus, she hesitated. There's something else. Her wounds. They're healing. That's impossible. I know. But look. Dr. Martinez indicated a deep gash across the woman's shoulder. What had been a raw, ugly wound 2 days ago now appeared to be closing, the edges of torn flesh knitting together with impossible slowness. It's minimal, but it's definitely happening. Marcus stared at the healing wound, his mind racing. He'd read about Fenrathi regenerative abilities in the database, but everything had indicated that such healing stopped at death. This was something else entirely. Doctor, what if she's not actually dead? I've checked every possible sign of life. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no respiratory function. By every medical standard, we know she's deceased. Dr. Martinez frowned at her readings. But you're right to question it. Something is definitely happening here. That evening, Marcus continued his work on the casket, but now with a growing sense of urgency that he couldn't explain. The carved wolves seemed to watch him with knowing eyes, and more than once he found himself glancing at the woman's face, half expecting to see some sign of awareness. The station's other residents had begun treating his workshop like a shrine. People would stop by quietly, leaving small tokens or simply standing in respectful silence for a few minutes before moving on. Word had somehow reached the alien sectors of the station, and Marcus was surprised to see a few non-human visitors as well. A Tellurian merchant brought a small crystal that supposedly helped guide souls to their rest. A family of Rex traders left a bundle of aromatic herbs that their people used in funeral rites. Even some of the usually aloof Kethmori civilians came by, though they said nothing and left no gifts. On the third night, as Marcus worked by the light of his carving lamps, he heard something that made his blood freeze, a soft sound barely audible above the station's ambient noise, a whisper of air like the faintest of sighs. He looked up from his work to find the wolf woman's eyes open, staring directly at him. Marcus stumbled backward, his chisel clattering to the floor. The woman's eyes were a startling amber color, and they tracked his movement with unmistakable intelligence. Her lips moved, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "The stars heard your prayers." The words were in perfect standard, though her accent carried the musical quality that marked all Fenrathi's speech. Marcus stood frozen, caught between wonder and terror, as the supposedly dead warrior slowly sat up on his work table. "You're alive," he breathed. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers as if testing their responsiveness. "I was dead. I remember the darkness, the cold, but something called me back." She looked at him again, and Marcus saw gratitude in those amber eyes. "You called me back. I don't understand. I'm just a carpenter. I was trying to give you a proper burial." The wolf woman smiled, revealing those sharp canines he'd glimpsed before, but the expression was warm, not threatening. The Fenrathi have legends about such things, stories of souls lost in the void, called back by acts of pure compassion. She gestured to the half-finished casket, taking in the intricate carvings and careful craftsmanship. "You honored me when my own people could not." The universe noticed. Marcus felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. What happens now? Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and the automated announcement system crackled to life with a message that made Marcus's blood run cold. "All personnel to emergency stations. Kethmori battle fleet detected approaching the system. Estimated time to arrival 6 hours." Marcus Chen had been working on the orbital construction platform for 3 years when the Kethmori Emperor's transport ship arrived. The massive vessel cast shadows across the human settlement like a metallic storm cloud, its weapons gleaming in the artificial light of the space station. Marcus wiped sawdust from his hands and watched through the viewport as the alien delegation disembarked. The Kethmori were tall, reptilian beings with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. Their empire stretched across 17 star systems, and humans were barely tolerated as a client species. Marcus had heard the stories about their cruelty, their games of dominance and submission that kept lesser races in line. Emperor Vexthul himself emerged from the transport, his scales a deep crimson that spoke of anger or amusement. Behind him, his guards carried what appeared to be a cargo container, roughly the size of a person. The procession moved through the station's corridors with military precision, heading directly toward the human administrative sector. Marcus continued his work, carving intricate wooden panels for the new meditation chamber the human colonists had requested. Wood was precious here, imported at great expense from Earth, but the settlers insisted that some things were worth the cost. The familiar scent of cedar and pine reminded them of home, of forests and rivers they might never see again. The commotion outside grew louder. Marcus could hear Administrator Wells arguing with the Emperor in the common tongue, their voices echoing through the metal corridors. The Kethmori delegation seemed to find something amusing, their translator devices producing sounds that resembled laughter. 20 minutes later, Administrator Wells appeared at Marcus's workshop door, his face pale and drawn. Behind him stood 2 Kethmori guards and a floating cargo pod that hummed with stasis technology. "Marcus," Wells said, his voice carefully controlled, "the Emperor has gifted you something. It's apparently some sort of honor among their people." The Kethmori guards activated the pod's controls, and the container split open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Inside lay a woman, clearly not human, her body covered in fine silver fur that seemed to shimmer despite being matted with dried blood. She had the general proportions of a human female, but her face was more angular, almost canine. Her ears were pointed, and even unconscious, Marcus could see the hint of fangs behind her lips. "She's a Fenrathi," one of the guards explained through his translator. "A wolf woman from the Outer Rim. Died in the gladiator pits 3 days ago. The Emperor thought a carpenter might find use for the bones and hide." Marcus stared at the lifeless form before him. The Fenrathi were legendary warriors, a proud species that had fought the Kethmori expansion for decades before being conquered. This woman bore the scars of countless battles, but even in death, there was something noble about her features. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "Why would he give this to me?" The second guard's scales flickered with what might have been contempt. "The Emperor heard that humans have strange customs regarding their dead. He thought it amusing to see what you would do with a proper warrior's corpse." Administrator Wells looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Marcus, you don't have to accept this. We can tell them—" "No," Marcus interrupted, still looking at the wolf woman. "I'll take her." The guard seemed surprised by his immediate acceptance. They transferred the body to Marcus's workshop and departed without another word, leaving him alone with the dead Fenrathi warrior. Marcus had seen death before. He'd lost his wife in the colony ship accident that brought them to this system, had helped bury dozens of settlers who couldn't adapt to life in space. But there was something different about this woman. Even in death, she seemed to possess a fierce dignity that the Emperor's cruel joke couldn't diminish. He spent the evening clearing space in his workshop, moving aside his current projects to make room for what he knew would be his most important work. As night cycle approached, Marcus pulled up everything he could find about Fenrathi burial customs in the station's database. What he learned made his heart ache. The Fenrathi believed that the soul remained tethered to the body for 7 days after death, waiting for the proper rites to guide it to the eternal hunt. They honored their dead with elaborate ceremonies, carving their stories into sacred wood and burning the bodies under the open sky of their homeworld. This woman had been denied those rites, left to rot in alien hands as entertainment for a tyrant's whims. Marcus looked at her face in the dim light of his workshop, noting the small braids in her silver hair, the intricate tattoos that marked her arms and shoulders. She had been someone's daughter, perhaps someone's mate. She had fought and bled and died far from home. And the universe had forgotten her. "Not on my watch," he whispered to the darkness. Marcus began gathering his tools, his finest chisels and carving knives, the special woods he'd been saving for his most ambitious projects. If the Emperor thought he would simply dispose of the body like refuse, the reptilian tyrant was about to learn something about human stubborn.